Sharing your passion starts with taking that first step. Take Will, for example. His first step was taking free TV classes at Northwest Community Television. He's learning production skills and now has access to cutting-edge equipment. He's working on local music productions, meeting new people, and gaining experience needed to produce his own show. Best of all, he's sharing his passion for music with others in his community. Share your passion. Visit nwct.org.
Hello and welcome to Book Beat. Today our guest is Dan Maurer. Welcome, Dan.
It's wonderful to be here. Thank you.
Dan is the author of books on a number of subjects. Today we're going to discuss particularly 3 of them. And Dan, I'd like you to talk about them. And they cover some pretty heavy subjects. And one of them is a memoir, and 2 of them are graphic novels. What can you tell me about that?
We should talk about what a graphic novel is, first of all. A graphic novel is a big, fat comic book.
Cool.
Basically. And yeah, 2 of my productions, things that I've written are that. But first, to get into the first one, Sobriety, a graphic novel, I think I need to tell a bit about my story because it influences and it's directly foundational to the work I do as a freelance writer. I was born in Iowa, but very quickly my parents moved up to Minnesota, and we lived in Anoka, and that's where I grew up. So this is kind of my home territory, so to speak. I had a good childhood. My father founded his own company called MP Incorporated, and that's my claim to fame. My father is the inventor of the portable TENS unit. Yeah, which is a transcutaneous electrical neurological stimulation.
And I have used one.
Yes, yeah. Okay,
over
well,
the
I'll tell
years.
you, that's nice to hear. My mother was a teacher, like you. Yeah, and I grew up as a small kid. I was bullied on a lot. Had some difficulties in my childhood, but basically things were pretty good. I lived in Germany as an exchange student for a bit until I came back to Anoka and then graduated from Anoka High School. And I excelled in everything that I did. I was a triple major, German, which was pretty easy, mathematics and economics. And after that, I met my soon-to-be wife at Concordia College in Moorhead. We got married. We lived for a bit in eastern Montana and then moved to Dubuque, Iowa to go to graduate school while we were there. Got a job, of all places, in western North Dakota, north of Bismarck. And I was a professional, and my wife had a nice job there, and we started a family. And we had our first son, Joshua, and our second, Nathan, and life seemed to be good. Except I was dealing with some really difficult things personally in my own life. I had depression. I frequently was bored. And I struggled a lot with the job that I had. I didn't want to do that job anymore, but I felt like I had painted myself in a corner, so to say. And the way that I dealt with it is I drank. And at first it was in the afternoon, but then it was at noon, and then it was much easier than in the morning to start drinking then, and then by the time my wife came home from work later on, I would be done. And I was so good at my job in what I did that I tried to hide it as much as possible, and I think that people probably knew in the position that I was at. But it wasn't healthy. I was burying all of my problems, and like a lot of things that happen in addiction, things just got worse.
Yes.
Yeah. So soon we moved from Underwood, North Dakota, north of Bismarck, and I got another job out in the western part of the state, in the oil boom, which has been in the news lately, in Williston.
Oh, yes.
And I was not happy at all. And by then, my drinking had advanced to, it was becoming very inconvenient and problematic, and it was hard on my system, too. on my guts. And so I didn't want to do that anymore. And the things that I sought was painkillers, pills in general.
Ooh.
And so I became addicted to them. And once again, this was something that I could just stuff in my pocket, something that was mine, my own, my precious, that I could keep for myself to try to manage my life. But the more I tried to manage, the more unmanageable it became.
Yes.
And soon what happened, to make a long story short, is my drinking had completely gone out of control. My pill use had gone out of control. I'd been to one inpatient treatment and then a second after that. And the third was the result of an arrest. I was drinking and also taking benzodiazepines, and when you take those two drugs concomitantly, often what will happen is something called interrogated amnesia, where you black out. So you're not passed out, but you're walking around like your brain is detached.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and so I got these crazy ideas in my head. One of the ideas that I had is that I would walk into other people's houses and see if I could find other pills. And I don't remember a lot of it, and it was very ashamed of that, but I've worked through that, and I'm sorry to have hurt the people that I did. But it also, the result of my arrest was that I eventually got sober. Now, all of this happened, Sue Ellen, when I was working as an ELCA, that is a Lutheran pastor. And the reason why I share that story, and in fact, when I share my story publicly when I speak on addiction and recovery, I wait to drop that later on. Not because people are surprised at pastors doing illegal things, because pastors do all sorts of things nowadays, it seems like. Yeah,
that is true.
But to show that addiction affects anyone. It doesn't matter if you're white or black, or if you're a man or a woman, or if you're gay or you're straight. It doesn't matter if you're a plumber, a pipe fitter, a pastor, or a housewife. You know, addiction can happen to you, and you don't think you're getting into it as you do it. You think that you have it under control. Nobody starts out thinking that they're going to ruin their life and they're going to be arrested.
Yeah, or I'm going to be an alcoholic.
Or I'm going to be an alcoholic.
Yeah, that's my goal. Is I'm going to be an alcoholic.
Yeah, nobody starts out in that way. But then once you find yourself in that trap, it becomes very difficult to extricate yourself from that. So my arrest was a blessing. You know, and I am very grateful and thankful for the Williams County Sheriff's Department in Williams, in western North Dakota, when I was standing down in the basement of a jail cell with the anti-suicide smock on, wondering how did I get to this place. That then became, it really became that which changed me, which transformed me. I needed to have that hard bottom. I went to Hazelden in Center City, Minnesota. I was there for a month, thought I was done. My counselor said, no, we think that you need more time. Well, how much? As long as it takes. So I was there for 2 additional months, a total of 3 months in inpatient. After that, I thought I was done, and obviously I wasn't going to be a pastor anymore, so I thought, well, what am I going to do? And they said, no, you're not done yet. And I said, well, what do I need to do now? And at that point, I wanted to do anything to get my life back, because I'm a gifted person. And I love my family, and I have something to give back to the world.
Yes.
So they said, well, we really know what we're doing. And Hazelden, the Hazelden Betty Ford Foundation, they do outstanding work. They understand addiction, and they're looking to confront stigma, to let people realize that this is an illness and that people can get better. I listened to the advice that they gave me, and they said, you need to live in a sober house in St. Paul. I said, well, what's that? They said, well, it's just a house with a bunch of other sober guys, and every once in a while you pee in a cup to make sure you're not using, and you go to meetings, and you learn how to be sober once again. And I was very thankful for that opportunity, because all of that work that they had me do was the foundation for a transformation, not only for me personally, but also for my professional life, because I was to be doing a different kind of ministry, and that is the ministry of communication, of storytelling. I've said this to you before, but I'll say it to you again.
Yes.
Human beings are story creatures. We understand the world through stories. I mean, you think about all the times where a parent or a grandparent is sitting around with their kids around a campfire cooking s'mores. we love that so much because you can share the stories of your past, some of them fictional even,
Yes.
and really communicate what your life is about for the next generation, for your kids. And I wanted to do that. I wanted to be a storyteller. I've had an interest in reading and writing for a long time. So I told my wife when I was living in a sober house, I said, I know what I'm going to be now. And she said, oh, what's that? You know, kind of rolling her eyes a little bit. You know, she was wondering whether or not she was going to stay with me, but thank goodness that she did. She was working a program for herself of recovery. And I said, well, I know what I want to do. I'm going to be a writer. And she's like, oh yeah, right. But I kept this dream. And the dream that I had was that I wanted to produce a graphic novel, a comic book that would communicate what the steps a person needs to take to transform their lives about recovery from addiction.
Yes.
And so I brought the idea to Hazelden Publishing, of all places, and they said, oh, that's nice, Fray Dan. Yes, you're 7 months in recovery. I don't think we're going to let you do this quite yet. So they said no. But I was determined to do that. So I hired an artist, Spencer Amundsen, who was a student at the Minneapolis College of Art and Design. And I liked his work, and we wrote out about 10 pages, and we brought it in, once again, to Hazelden. And the second time that I brought it there, the acquisitions editor took a look at it. He said, we've wanted to do this for a long time. This is really interesting. So they said, but we need to send this to our accountants to see if we can make it pay. And they came back with another answer. No, we can't make this pay. It doesn't go hard enough in the consumer market. So undeterred, we produced 10 more pages, and we brought it to him again. And by that time, we had worked some things out where Hazelden Publishing, they finally decided that, yes, this is something that, especially youth and young adults in recovery, it's the resource they need. And that's where we got Sobriety, a graphic novel.
Okay. And that comes to my next question. Your audience is youth and young adults. Then.
Right, yes.
And can you share a little bit with our viewers about the content? You talked about sobriety, but what kinds of things are covered in the story?
Yes. Well, first of all, in my personal life, I follow a 12-step model for recovery from addiction. Now, one of the things that I am a very staunch proponent of is what Minnesota Recovery Connection, an organization out of Minneapolis, what they promote is many different modalities of recovery. And what that means basically is that 12-step may and does work for many, many people. I mean, millions of people have gotten sober through the 12 steps of recovery. But there are many demographics of people, for whatever reason, they don't understand that, or that they don't relate to it. So I do believe in many different modalities for recovery. But what this book is about is just about the 12 steps. And so what I do is I disassemble, through the power of story, the stories of 5 different fictional characters. And I do say this is a nonfiction book because it shows the truth of what the wreckage of addiction looks like, but they're fictional characters, and I base them off of people that I know in my own life and just from my imagination, and I tell the story. Larry is the old-timer, and I really had to fight to keep as many pages in there I wanted of his story, because especially as younger people and young adults go out into the rooms, so to speak, they're going to meet people like Larry that are above 60 years old, that got sober themselves, that have a very particular understanding of what recovery is about. So he is sort of the traditional tried and true alcoholic who got sober. However, there's a wide diversity of characters. We have another character we have, his name is Alex, and he is of African descent, gay, and lives in London. And an atheist, I should say, too.
And an atheist.
An atheist. So he covers sort of like the polar opposite of Larry, but he's a very likable character, and I got to like his story a lot. He's primarily an abuser of ecstasy, but surprisingly embraces the 12 steps because he is able to differentiate his higher power as something other than God. Matt, the next character that we have, is from San Diego, and his drug of choice, his poison, so to speak, is methamphetamine. We have then, I just have to look real quick here to see. I wrote these characters, we always have to remember who they are. Debbie, she is from Florida, and her primary drug of choice is pain pills, and she has a very, shall we say, fundamentalist understanding of what the 12 steps are about. And then the last, her name is Hannah. She's of Asian descent, and she's adopted, and she's from rural Wisconsin. So we wanted to cover the gamut of different demographics that are really out there and portray them as characters to show that lots of different people, they can understand what the 12 steps are. And the graphic novel, why it's fun and why it works, and why I chose it really as the medium to communicate this message, is that they've done some very interesting studies recently. Scientists have looked to see at what media is out there and how people learn. And one of the things that they found is when you have pictures and text together in the format of a comic book or a graphic novel, that the functional MRI studies that they've done on people's brains is they have found that people learn better with comics than anything else. Isn't that sort of amazing?
Well, there are oral learners, there are visual learners, there are spoken, oral versus oral.
Right. And people learn in many, many different ways, and you as a teacher.
Yes, spatial. People that have good spatial ability,
exactly.
People like me who have no spatial ability.
Yeah.
The idea that you can combine methods of learning in one book is astounding. That's really
and
great.
what's very interesting too, teachers are discovering the power of comics, and they're actually using comic books in elementary school to teach something. And when you stop to think about that for a bit, that is amazing, because my father, when he was growing up, his grandparents who raised him out in the Black Hills of South Dakota, he would read comics books, and they'd look at him and they said, "Kid, what are you doing? You're gonna rot your brain reading those things." But what they didn't realize is he was doing more learning with that comic book than he would even with just a work of prose, which I've also written. But
part of the issue with comic books is it takes kids where they are.
Yes.
And my mantra is get them reading.
Yes.
However, if it's comic books, yay team.
Yes.
If it's, picture books, whatever the case is, get them reading.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think one of the things we're finding on the internet is the webzine or web strip comics, and also just the text that appears on the internet. It's a wonderful resource, not only for kids, but for everyone, because you have a resource there that you can just reach out and find some good stuff, but there's also some bad things too. You really have to sift it through a filter, don't you?
Yes, yes, that's exactly true. And part of what we have the responsibility with our kids is teaching them how to use those filters.
Yeah, I agree.
Not just the physical filters or the electronic filters, but the filters of their brains. Right.
To have the critical judgment to say, this written piece or this work is worthwhile, and to at least critique it, to say whether or not this is going to work. Well, Sobriety, a graphic novel, really made my career, and it launched my career as a freelance writer, and that's what I do now professionally. I am solely a freelance writer. It is my day job, so to speak.
It is your day job.
And but I had to decide for myself, and working with my publicist and a few other people, I mentioned to them, what is it that I want to do? And everybody, what they told me was, you have to find a niche, and you have to say, this is what I do if I want to make a career out of it as a writer. And I think this will be especially interesting for your viewers today, is how do you do it? How do you make your career as a writer? Well, find who it is you're writing for.
Okay.
Find a way to tell the story effectively, and then produce it and give it to them. And that's really what it's about. When people ask me and they say, well, who do you want to read your books? The answer they should not hear is everyone. Because you can't give a book to everyone. And plus, everybody doesn't read. I mean, so my books, in particular, are nonfiction works that speak to the power of transformation, particularly personal transformation and personal change. On my website, changesreal.com, that's all one word, so everybody knows that. Changesreal.com, I share the power of personal transformation, and I share other people's stories, and we have a lot of neat sections on that website. It's been extremely powerful, and it's done really well too. It's kind of been a surprise for me. Interestingly enough, my past, my training as a Lutheran minister and going to seminary, that past provided the new foundation or impetus of a story that I had. And it was from a friend of mine. His name is Kevin, and we went to seminary together. And when Kevin was at seminary, first of all, I should tell you, this was prior to the ELCA allowing openly gay and lesbian clergy to serve in leadership functions within the Lutheran Church. So one of the things that Kevin told me is he came out to me and he said, you know, I'm gay. And it took a lot of courage for him to say that because, you know, him being outed like that, it could have cost him a career if he had a relationship in that. But we remained good friends, and we graduated seminary together, and he served a church, several churches, and eventually ended up in a church in Hawaii, of all places. It was great, too, because I got to write the second book in Hawaii.
Oh, that's
So
not
he
too
gave me a
bad.
call one day, and he was having some trouble in his own life personally, and he had been seeing a therapist, and he said, okay, Dan, I've got something to tell you, and you're never going to think of me in the same way. And I said, well, okay, Kevin, what's that? You already told me that you're gay, so what is that? And he said, well, and then he told me the story of when he was in 1975, growing up in a suburb of St. Louis, Missouri, where he was basically pimped out by an older man. And that was his life for one summer, the summer of 1975. And as he relayed his story to me, I was listening on the phone, I thought as a writer, well, this is fabulous. I have to tell the story to other people. And no, I bet nobody has ever heard this before. So I proposed to him. I said, let's write a book together on it. He said, no way, I'm not going to do it. Well, he gave several presentations down at Wartburg Seminary in Dubuque, Iowa. And while he was there, he shared his story to one of the professors there, Dr. Gwen Saylor, and she encouraged him to think twice about sharing his story in a wider format, like such as book. And so when I asked him again, he relented and he said, okay, let's do it. And it took a lot of courage for him to do that. And it really exposed him to a lot of stuff. I mean, there has been some criticism that I've found, both from his family and also from people that haven't believed him, but it's a totally true story, and it was the most profound story I ever heard. He shared this story how when he was there in a park in St. Louis, Tower Grove Park, he met two other boys who were park hustlers, underage kids, and he showed me, especially back at that time in the mid-'70s, how marginalized and really thrown away that the kids were to the rest of society. Not only because he was gay, but that he was an underage kid doing these things. But those two friends, their names were Stevie and Squirrel, and I share about it in this book, Faraway, a suburban boy story, is a victim of sex trafficking. It was the most powerful story I ever heard of redemption, and I'm not going to give away the rest of the book because it's very, very powerful. And I'm very proud of the work, and it was a lot of hard work. But when it was finally published, it's gotten rave reviews, and I've heard from a lot of people how it's been life-changing for them to read the story. One of the things we discovered, and a couple of our contributors that we had for the book, Dr. Rick Curtis and Dr. Anthony Marcus out of the John Jay College of Criminal Justice in New York City in Manhattan. They had conducted a survey on the East Coast, and they found that there was a very large minority, almost 50%, of the subjects that they interviewed and they found were either boys or transgendered youth. Now, that does not fit the narrative that we have for what human trafficking is or sex trafficking. Our narrative that we have is that it's a girl from Eastern Europe or a girl that's taken under by an older man living in a city in the United States with the promise of a job or something like that, and she is manipulated then to become a prostitute and becomes addicted to drugs and so on and so forth. Now, that is true. That's part of the narrative.
Yes.
But that is the only narrative that people are sharing about that story. And what is so transformational about Kevin's story is that it is sharing the real story of what has happened to thousands and thousands of boys, and especially transgendered youth.
That's very interesting because there's got to be two sides to the story. If girls are being trafficked, obviously boys are being trafficked, and it just isn't publicized.
Well, it isn't very obvious, I think, because people have a heteronormative understanding of the world, that an older man is interested in a younger girl. Well, that's not the way the world works.
No.
You know, today is the as you mentioned, I noticed on Facebook today, it's the celebration of 50 years of Star Trek, and I'm a huge fan. And one of the things that they celebrate in Star Trek, and I think it's really true, is infinite diversity and infinite combinations. That's the same of what sexuality is too. You know, it's a whole gamut. And people can do that in healthy ways, or they can do it in very unhealthy ways.
Right.
And what I wanted to share through this book is that there are unhealthy ways that people use other human beings. And what's great about both these works, really, Sobriety launched my career, but especially the second book at least garnered me the national attention. And just last year I did an interview in New York City, and it was very exciting and really fun. And we cover both of these stories and my story as well. So I'm looking forward to that coming out.
Oh, that will be wonderful.
Yeah.
Can you share something a little more about R.K. Klein, the
Yes, Kevin. He went with me to seminary, and he was a pastor a little longer than I was, I think about 14, 15 years. And now he's doing a different type of ministry, and he seeks to have a very private life. I think that I think one of the difficult things for him with this work is he was very courageous and bold, but he didn't feel very comfortable in the spotlight. So this is something that I've taken on now, to be an advocate not only for him, but for the thousands of boys who have been used in their life to let others know about it.
That's really good that you can take on that advocacy for this population of people. Let's move to another. Yes. Let's move to another totally different subject.
Okay.
You did a graphic novel about Martin Luther.
About Martin Luther, the reformer.
The reformer.
Yes.
Transformation.
Yes, you talk about a transformational story, both personal and also societal. You can't get a better one. So after these first two books came out, and as a freelancer, what I try to do is try to network with as many people as possible to share with them what my work is about. And I had also done some freelance writing for a place in Minneapolis, which is I don't know what you call it, a subdivision of Augsburg Fortress. It's now called 1517 Media.
An imprint.
Yes, an imprint. That was Spark House. And
yes.
What they do is they produce Sunday school resources for progressive modern churches. And I had written some Sunday school curriculum for them. That was part of what I did in my freelance writing work. Mm-hmm. So after I had done that work for them and I was finished with my contract, they approached me and they said, look, we have something big coming up. And I said, like, oh, geez, 1517 2017. 500 years. That's what's big. Yes, it is a celebration of the 500th anniversary of the beginning of the Protestant Church, the Protestant Reformation. And so what they said is, we're producing a whole compendium of these works celebrating the 500 years, and what we would like to have, especially for kids and youth, is a graphic novel, a comic book. Would you be willing to produce that for us? And I was like, yeah. So I sat down with the team, and our first idea that we had, believe it or not, was we wanted to, and I laugh when I think about this right now. It's really kind of funny, Sue Ellen. We wanted to produce a comic book on Martin Luther, and for the characters, I proposed that we do anthropomorphic dogs. Like we'd have these Labrador retrievers and little chihuahuas walking around. Well, needless to say, they sent that out to their testers, and they said, no, we're not going to do that. So what they ended up finally doing is producing a graphic novel with just, and I don't know if we can zoom up on that or not, but
we'll zoom up on it.
Yeah, yeah, it's really fun. It's just got Luther as an adult with his kids, and in particular, what they wanted to get with this book, Papa Luther, they wanted to show the book through the eyes of his children looking at their father, and that Martin Luther would share his story to his kids through a separate story that they were going through just in their life as a family living in the early 1500s. And I showed that, and one of the things I discovered was very powerful is that Luther and Katie, they had a lot of kids, and they had an interesting life, and we don't have a whole ton of information about them, but that's good for me because I could create then a whole sub-story about that, which is fictional, but then share the real stuff that happened within the Reformer's life.
And it's a truth, even though it's told through fiction.
That's right.
There's truth that comes out.
Yes, and certainly the events of Luther, we can verify the veracity of those things. But what's great, once again, with the graphic novel is it just engages readers, and it's not only youth. We like to think that comics are either for kids or lowbrows, but that's not the truth. I mean, we think of comics as we like to think of comics as what you see in the Sunday funnies, but you know, it's more than that. And first of all, we have to denigrate or somehow say that the Sunday funnies are insignificant, because we know they're not. Charles Schultz, who's from Minnesota, you know, from St. Paul, he was extremely influential. But we think comics, yes, ma'am, I'll save you, and then the Superman flies down and he saves the woman who was put on the railroad tracks with she's tied up in a gag around her mouth. But that's not what it's about. It's a very powerful medium to communicate a story. Once again, human beings are story creatures. What I try to do as a writer is I try to notice things. Writers are noticers.
Yes, you had said that earlier.
Yeah. Writers are noticers, and that's one of the things I love about being a writer, and I enjoy writing very much, is I try to notice the things that are relevant to share in the story so that the people can see in their mind's eyes what that story is. One of the greatest things that we have, the gift that writers have, is we paint on a canvas, and that canvas is in our readers' minds. And I'm sure that you, as somebody who appreciates reading yourself, you can relate to that.
Oh, absolutely. I don't need every detail in a story to paint the picture in my mind.
That's right.
I know what color the dress is, or I know what the expression is on the person's face. Right. And that really grabs you. And the thing I was going to say about comic books is all you have to do is look at Comic-Con or one of the other comic book conventions, and you have a whole panoply of people from every walk of life who are dedicated comic book readers and collectors.
Yeah, that's right. And it's about the stories. And if it weren't about the stories, then people wouldn't look at it. If it were just about the artwork, and some of the artwork is very good. But one of the things I should mention, just because I can give instructions to an artist then when they produce a graphic novel to say, I want this sort of expressions on this person's face. That's just another layer of the story that we have there. And what's nice about comics is it just goes much more swiftly. People can read through a graphic novel, and especially the two I have, really in an afternoon. Whereas a book like this, and I will say Faraway is a work of prose narrative. It sucks you in there, and you read it a lot, but that takes a little bit longer. And the picture that is painted in your mind, it comes more from your imagination. But the works are different, and that's okay. It's okay to have different things that I do.
We covered the significance of why Papa Luther came out, the 500th anniversary of the Reformation. You talked a little bit about other kinds of works that you do as a freelance writer.
Right.
You mentioned some things about, to me off camera, about clergy resources. And we have here some children's books about science. Could you talk about those, please?
Sure. I want all your viewers to understand, it is hard to make a living as a writer. So if it is your dream, make sure it's your passion. And it is for me. I have to write. I have to create, because writing is almost a godlike power, isn't it?
Yes.
We have the power from our imaginations, to put something on paper and to give it to a person and to move their heart. Geez, I can't think of a better ministry than that. And I'm very thankful for recovery, because I've gotten the opportunity to do this. But part of what you need to do is that you have to be willing to have day jobs. And that's one of the things you talked about. Well, my day job, what I do is I edit and I help produce resources for a place called Clergy Stuff. And we produce worship resources for the narrative lectionary. And Kimberly K. Sleech is from Bloomington, and she spoke with me last year, and I've been extremely grateful, because I love that job a lot. I also created their website, and I created another website called funchurchplays.com, and on there, it's a resource for churches to go to find grace-centered progressive plays and skits. They can just go to there and download them and have fun. And so I do that, Clergy Stuff and Fun Church Plays. I've got my own website. I have a little publishing company called Mount Curve Press. I create websites for other people. I do freelance writing for several addiction firms. I've written curriculum, and I also write books. So you have to be able to wear lots of different hats.
Right.
And one of the exciting things is in today's world, with social media, the connections that you can make with other writers and people who are interested in reading, is more people than ever before can do this as a career, and you just have to know how to make it work.
And the audience is infinite.
Yes.
That's the thing.
Well, infinite, and so only in so many ways that people are interested in the genre that you write.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's, what I mean by infinite is that you tell this person here, and they tell somebody else, and that person tells somebody else.
Yes, it really is very much word of mouth. And what's nice about this show here is that you're reaching out to people that are not only readers, but also writers. And it's an exciting life. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. But let me tell you, you do have to have passion. And I work very hard at it. I keep sort of a strange schedule.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, in the writing process for me, I need to be well rested. A lot of people, they work well in the early wee morning hours. I am not a morning person. I'm much more a night owl, but I need to get my rest too. But unfortunately, our world doesn't allow us to, sort of get up at 10:30 in the morning and still at least hold a job, because people have to keep hours. So Yeah, I get up early in the morning. I take my kid to school. I come back, I take a nap, and then I get up again. And then I really work most days until around 11. And then I'll just have fun watching Star Trek or reading a book later on at night. So that's my schedule. It's weird, but it works for me.
That's what counts.
Yeah.
You mentioned the passion that you feel a person has to have to be able to write.
Yes.
For aspiring writers, what does that mean in terms of process? You know, you talk about your particular schedule that works.
Right.
Do you write every day? Do you work on different projects all at once? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes.
Please?
A lot of that is dictated by what's going on in my other jobs and what project is up to bat. Okay. With clergy stuff, it's nearly a daily duty. I'm not going to call it a chore because I really like doing it a lot. Reaching out to customers and just answering their emails and looking at the stuff on the website, editing the work that our writers do, and also writing some of the content that I have myself. With my other jobs, it's just the basis of whether or not the work is out there. I mean, freelancers are always hungry. And that means that you have to take on the work as it comes, but it's feast or famine. And some days you just have, I get certain days where I have 2 hours of work I got to do. There's other days where I have 12. And also I should mention, part of being a writer is the willingness to come and speak to you and something like this, and doing interviews and sharing the work that you do so that other people know about it. Freelance writers, indie writers especially, independent writers, you need to have some business acumen to understand how the world works, how the business world works of what publishing is. I've had some very good mentors and some people that I spoke with. My publicist is excellent, and she has taught me about how the structure of publishing works and how to sell books. And I've been very thankful for that. I should mention, with the different works that I have out here, Sobriety, Faraway, Papa Luther, and these freelance works that I have, I am working on a new book, and I'm excited to share it with you.
Oh, please tell us.
Yes, it's very exciting work because no one has done it before.
Okay, and
there
what is
that? a concept out there in psychology that's called a resilience. And basically, it's very simple. What resilience is, or resiliency, is a person's ability to bounce back after stress or trauma over a difficult situation that you have in your life. And believe it or not, we all should believe this is part of the human condition. Newsflash, life is hard. And newsflash, none of us gets out alive. That means we're going to lose our parents. Some of us may lose our children, to death. We're going to have to go through difficult changes, through being fired from our job, through addictions, through recoveries, through marriages and divorces. Everybody's going to have traumatic situations that we're put into. But aging, there you go. It's another one, right? Yeah, it's another struggle that everybody's going to have to go through.
And you can do it gracefully, or you can do it difficultly.
That's right. And what you're identifying there, that graceful part of that is resilience. And also, every human being has the power to be a resilient person. So one of the things I'm looking in this book is to identify what makes a human being, what makes them resilient.
Okay.
What allows them to bounce back. And a topic that nobody's written on before is looking at different spiritual assets. And these are nothing more than really virtues. Things like honesty, gratitude, acceptance, fortitude, perseverance. All these different spiritual assets that undergird and really foundationally provide a structure on which to build a resilient response to life. Now, the stories that I share in this work are very exciting. I share my own story of addiction and recovery, and the spiritual asset that I identified for myself, which is honesty. And that's in the introduction of the book. And our headlining story that we have was from a Minnesotan, a young woman. Her name was Kathy, and she grew up in this area, in fact, the north end of the cities. She had moved to Mississippi, and there she had some kids and started a family. And her husband one day decided to try to kill her. And he came home, he retrieved a machete, and he attacked her viciously. And she almost died. And I share her story in chapter 1 in the first person, much like I did with my second book, Faraway, with Kevin's story. I paint a picture for the readers to say what was going through her mind when all of this happened. And in particular, how did she define something for her that was her faith asset? And I'm not going to give another spoiler because I want you to read the book. Yes,
please don't.
That she identified for herself, and it has made the difference of the world for her. And one of the things that she's excited about is to reach out to other women who are in marriages that are really abusive, to say it's okay to get out. And she's going to use this book as a launching point to share her story. And what's exciting about it is I not only show everyone her story. Remember, writers have to show, don't tell. So yeah,
absolutely.
I'm showing people in their mind's eyes what's happening in this book. Another one exciting story that we have is of a Syrian refugee who is now living in Greece. And I had to write his story in the first person pseudonymously. Did I say that correct? He had to use a pseudonym because if there were factions that found out in Syria that this was coming out in a public format, his family that are still there, they could be threatened. I share another story of an American soldier, a U.S. soldier who comes from a Cherokee American background. He grew up in Oklahoma, and what he identifies as his spiritual asset is sort of an active acceptance. That is, acceptance of the difficulties that are around you. And that comes from something that's called the Cherokee Harmony Ethic. And it's absolutely fascinating. And what's great about this book on resilience and spirituality is it's really showing how spirituality makes a difference for us in our life, because I think everybody is wondering that right now is, how does church matter? How does spirituality, how does theology and my belief system that I have, how does that matter for me? This book answers that, and it shares it in these fantastic stories. So I'm very excited for it to come out, as you might imagine.
Oh, that sounds tremendous. Well, I'm going to ask we're getting down in time, and I'd like to invite you to share anything that we haven't covered, if there's anything you'd like to add. What would you like to share anything else with our viewers?
The last thing I would like to say is don't be afraid to tell your story and also to write it down. If you want to write something, it doesn't have to be perfect. Just do it. And later on, you can send it to somebody else to critique and look at it, and don't be defensive about it. I mean, I wither under critique, but listen, everything I said to my editor, it always gets sent back. And I do this professionally, and I had to learn how to write well. Okay, but as I said it to my editor, she sends it back, and there's red all over the computer screen. As I look at it, that's just a fact of life. Is that even Joe Rowling and Stephen King, when they send stuff to the editors, it comes back edited also. It's part of the process of writing. So if you want to write, if you want to share your story, do it. That's the first thing I'd like to say. The second thing is that everyone can experience change and transformation in their lives. And that doesn't have to be something as raw or visceral as recovery from addiction. But say you want to lose some weight, or say you want to spend more time with your kids. These are changes that you can make. Now, nobody likes to change, especially Minnesotans. It seems like, how many Minnesotans does it take to change a light bulb? Change? Yeah, there you go, right? Yeah, we don't want to do that, right? But everybody can change. We don't like to do it, but the process can happen for anyone. And one of the things I share on my website, changeisreal.com, transformation is real, is that anybody can transform their lives, and they can change it. And the stories that are on there, I've been blessed. I'm very grateful to the people that have shared their stories. So it's been really neat. So write and share your change and embrace it, because it's worthwhile. Thank you so much for letting me speak with you today on BookBeat. It's been really fun.
Oh, thank you so much, Dan. We've covered a lot of ground. I hope our readers or rather our viewers will take this information and take it to heart. We did not talk about the children's books.
Yeah.
But Dan has written a series of children's books about science, and that is also out there under his name. So do look for him. Look for Dan's work on his website, which will be listed at the end of the show. We thank you very much for joining us today on BookBeat. We look forward to seeing you next time.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Dan.
Volunteering is more than just a word. It's a window to opportunities. Take Mark, for example. By taking free TV classes at Northwest Community Television, Mark is helping bring entertainment and information to his community, along with building a foundation of skills that will take him one step closer to his dreams. Share your passion. Visit nwct.org.